Hi, I'm Emily and welcome to the Pepperknits Knitting Podcast. Thank you for joining me for episode 7 and welcome back if you're a returning viewer, and thank you for joining me if this is your first time here. I hope everyone's been really well. I've been quite busy, mostly good things. We had a trip down to Margaret River over the most recent long weekend. I had my birthday, we've been doing engagement party planning. So in all of that, I still have managed to fit in quite a bit of knitting. So I do have quite a bit to share today and I'm looking forward to getting into it. Whilst we were down in Margaret River, we went down to the beach to watch the sunset, which was absolutely beautiful. And whilst I was there, I saw Brandon from Knitwits and Yarns. I knew that he lived in the area and I didn't think obviously that I was going to meet him. I wasn't sure if it was him or not. I could see his group of friends weren't sitting too far from mine, and I eventually plucked up the courage to go and ask him if that's who he was, and it was so awkward. I never ever do that. I never just go up to strangers and talk to them, but I did it and it was him, and I just very awkwardly was like, "Hi, I really like your designs." And he was like, "Oh, are you a knitter?" And I was like, "Yeah," and then just walked away, and it was so awkward. I'm glad I did it though. It was something a little bit adventurous for me, and I'm getting out of my comfort zone. Another thing is that I've started going to a knit night. Well, I've been to one. I went on Monday this week to Calico Ivy. I had a lovely invitation from another Perth knitter who I met on Instagram. I'd been to the knit night once before, maybe last year, and I didn't really click with anyone there. Everyone was lovely, but no one was in my age range, so it was really nice to go this time and have a bit more of a friend who I already kind of knew there. So I really enjoyed myself. I think it's something that I'll start going to regularly because it's really nice to engage with other knitters and talk about what podcasts we watch, what yarn we're using, projects that we have lined up, and it's a really nice way to unwind on a Monday evening, just chilling out and doing some knitting. So it was really good to go out of my comfort zone and glad that I did, and I think I'll probably start going regularly there as well. So that's all out of the way. I can jump into the actual knitting. I have 2 finished objects and a few new works in progress as well, and a couple of small acquisitions to share at the end. So my first finished object is my second sea salt tee. This is a design that I test knit last April for Atelier Castin, who is a beautiful French designer. This was actually my first test knit as well. This is the second version I've made, but the first version was for the test knit. And it is this absolutely beautiful t-shirt with so many beautiful details that I had to make a second one. So I'll try this one on and talk about it a little bit more in detail. Here is the t-shirt on. I knit this one in the Katia cotton cashmere yarn in the color light pink. It is a 90% cotton, only 10% cashmere in the yarn. I can definitely feel it. It feels a little bit more soft, not quite as stiff as a 100% cotton yarn. So it was interesting to try something a little bit different. And of course, it's very drapey and soft, and it's great for the really hot weather that we've been having here in Perth. So I knit this in the first size. My first version for the test knit, I knit the second size, which corresponded to my bust measurement and the recommended ears that the pattern had suggested. And I was very happy with the fit of that one. I wanted to keep the fit pretty much the same, but when I swatched in this yarn with the recommended needle size, I was way off gauge. The needles recommended in the pattern is a 3.5. So I swatched first on a 3.5 and was way off, and I did a second swatch on 3mm needles and was still a little bit above gauge, but I thought if I had gone down even further, the drapiness of the fabric would have been lost, and I was worried being 100% or almost 100% cotton yarn, it would become quite stiff and not being the fabric that I wanted. So saying all of that, I stuck with a 3mm needle and decided to size down in the pattern. Obviously that's not something that everyone can do for all patterns. If they're already on the lower limits of the smallest size, that's not something that is always accessible for people, but in this instance I was able to do that. I think I've spoken about Atelier, Castin or Marion in pretty much every episode. I hope she doesn't find it creepy. I think she watches my podcast, and I'm really sorry if this is weird, but it's the honest truth of what I really like to knit. Her designs are a combination of really fun knitting, and the finished product is something that fits so easily into my wardrobe. They're such chic and effortless designs. I'm just drawn to her designs, and she's such a lovely person as well. So I would definitely recommend checking out this and some of her other patterns that she has just released as well. So because I've spoken about her designs quite a bit, I'll just briefly go over the details of this t-shirt. I'll stand up and show off the full length of it as well. So this one is quite cropped. It's a little bit shorter than my first version. I quite honestly thought that the yarn would grow a little bit more than it did, so it is on a bit of the shorter side. If it really bothers me, I'm happy to go back and add in a few centimeters and then redo the bind off, but for now I'll just wear it and see how we go. I might even gain a little bit more length as I wear it and wash it a few more times as well. So my absolute favorite part of this design is the set-in sleeve, or the contiguous sleeve. It's the perfect fit for me. I like how clean it looks around here. There's no raglans that cut me off in a weird place. I think for my body type and the type of clothes that I like to wear, this is perfect for me. So it's very interesting and fun construction. I really enjoy doing it. It was some aeroplane knitting, so it was engaging, but it was quite intuitive at the same time. Especially the rounded neck here. I think it is just the absolute perfect rounded neck shape. It's really flattering on me, I think, and I can't say enough good things about this. I think in my previous episode, I had done the neck and pretty much finished the yoke, and I think I was onto the body, and I spoke about how I wasn't happy with how the neck was fitting. I hadn't used a small enough needle size, and it was flaring out quite a lot. I also think the way that I did the bind off and how long I made the collar didn't help that situation either. So I ended up ripping it out and going down another needle size. So I think that means for the body I used a 3mm, and then for the neck I used a 2.25mm. And now it sits really nicely, there's no flaring, and it's quite flat against the rest of the t-shirt. I have one more thing to say on this t-shirt, and that is the bind off method that I used. In the pattern there are links to 2 different videos with a stretchy and a non-stretchy sewn bind off. For my first version I did the stretchy version, and it took forever. It took me a good few evenings of just doing the bind off for the body. The sleeves weren't too bad because they're quite a small circumference, but I couldn't imagine doing that bind off on any of the larger sizes. It would have taken forever, but I suppose it is a good technique if you do need an edge to be stretchy. However, for this t-shirt, because there's quite a bit of positive ease, it's meant to be a little bit flowy, I just did the non-stretchy option instead, and it was so much quicker. I don't think it makes such difference in this t-shirt. They look very, very similar. I have my first version here, so I will take this one off and we can do a bit of a comparison. So the 2 bind off techniques are quite similar in how they're done. The stretchy one though is more like a duplicate stitch in that you're going through the both loops on the stitch on the back. That doesn't make any sense as I'm saying it, but the main difference between the stretchy and the non-stretchy is for the non-stretchy one, you're basically slipping off the stitch and then going through one of the purl bumps on the wrong side and just continuing that, rather than doing more like a duplicate or a Kitchener stitch where you're going up and over and through the same stitch multiple times to have a bit more yarn in the bind off so it can be a little bit more stretchy. So here is my first version. You can see the bind off is quite stretchy, and hopefully you can see that it looks like a row of garter bumps on the bottom where it joins into the main fabric. Whereas here in my second version, it does look different. Hopefully you can tell that, but it is not stretchy at all. I can feel the yarn when I pull it like this. I can feel tension on the yarn that is used to do the bind off. But as I said, for this design, I don't think it's necessary to spend the time to do the stretchy bind off. Holding this in my hands, I'm very glad that I chose to go down a size in the pattern and kept my needle size a little bit bigger than what I was getting gauge at. You can see the fabric is really nice and drapey, and the neckband I can feel is quite stiff because I've had to go down so many needle sizes to get it to sit nice and flat. I can tell that this yarn would have had a lot different characteristics in the finished fabric if I had probably gone down another needle size just to meet gauge. Here you can probably see how different the gauge is in the neckband versus the main fabric. But overall, very happy with this finished object. I can manage to wear it to work, even though it's a little bit too cropped. It's okay if I'm wearing very high-waisted trousers, but like I said, if I do notice that I am constantly trying to pull it down, I'll go back and add a few centimeters onto the length. It is a little bit more cropped than my first version, maybe only by an inch or so. When I did the bind off, I was in the car and didn't have my first version to compare it against. I was just guessing on the length. And obviously I did anticipate that I would gain a little bit more length when I blocked it, which I didn't. I don't think I really gained any length or width at all. I was a little bit surprised about that. I thought that I would, being that it's mainly cotton yarn. But the actual width of the t-shirt is very, very close to my first version. So I'm glad that I took a bit of a gamble in my sizes and my needles, and it paid off, and we have another very well-fitting t-shirt. My next finished object is another summer top, and is also the second version of the pattern that I've made, and that is my 9 p.m. tank designed by Tiffknit. This one is knit in Knitting for Olive cotton merino in the color Strawberry Ice Cream. I'm not gonna lie, I did buy it mainly because of the name. Of course, I am a bit of a pink phase at the moment, and I did really like the color anyway, but the name of the color definitely persuaded me a little bit more. So here's a close-up of the color. I really like the cotton merino. It's probably one of my favorite summer yarns. There's so much color variation where I assume it's the different fibers picking up the color differently, and it just means that you're not left with a really flat basic color. There's a bit more depth in there, especially when you're working something with plain stockinette. It adds a little bit of something extra into the piece that you're making. Before I try this one on, I did want to share a comparison on my first version versus this version. I knit them about a year apart, and they're knit in the same yarn on the same needle size, which is a 3mm needle. And it's just very interesting to me how different my gauge is now compared to a year ago. I have loosened up significantly. I've put one over the other, and you can see how much bigger the pink version is behind the brown version. It's just very interesting. It's not a bad thing necessarily. They both fit me very well. There's obviously just a lot of negative ease in this brown version, but it fits me very comfortably and I get a lot of wear out of this. And similarly, the pink version just has basically no ease. When I had this yarn as an acquisition, I think I said that I never usually wear pink. It's a color that I'm drawn to in other things, but not usually clothes. It's a little bit out there for me, but I think I can pull this one off. I really like it. It makes me feel really confident, and it's nice to be out of my comfort zone in terms of colors. So you can see that this fits me really well. There's basically no ease, but there is a little bit of waist shaping in here, so it does come in a little bit at the waist. And again, a really nice folded over edge. This time we actually have a pearl bump edge, which you might remember that is not my favorite, but I think in this yarn, it's such a tight gauge that it works a little bit better. It doesn't look bulky. I think it gives quite a clean finish at the bottom of the tank top. So one of my favorite things about this pattern is the fact that it's made to measure. When you buy the pattern, you're given a spreadsheet where you can enter in all of your measurements, and it will spit out the stitch counts and everything for you, and you just follow along like that. There's also lots of different modifications that you can make, like a full bust adjustment, I think, and things like that. Obviously they're all optional, so you can make sure that the end garment fits exactly how you want it to. I followed the same instructions that I had for my first one. For my first version, I knit the straps to a comfortable length. I did take into account that the yarn might grow a little bit, but I didn't anticipate how much it would grow. After I'd worn it a few times as well, it grew again even more, and then they ended up being basically too long to wear comfortably. I have managed to come up with a little bit of a fix for this one. I did think I was going to have to rip back all of the double knitting and basically just rip them out and then attach them again, which is a little bit annoying considering you start picking up in the middle here Then you work the double knitting around the front or the back, then you knit the whole strap and then join it again and re-knit it here. Because there's a little bit of pilling in the underarm already, I wasn't confident in ripping it back and I thought it would look really messy, especially if I was going to re-pick up the stitches here. I just thought it would leave big holes and I just wasn't really prepared to do that. So instead I added in some elastic into the double knit bands instead and then just tacked them down with a stitch here. It's still a little bit long, but because there's elastic in there now, it's a little bit more stable and it's a much more wearable piece. Like I said, it's a bit longer than these ones are. I haven't worn this one too much, so I'm expecting them to grow out just a little bit more than they currently are. If they don't, I'm quite happy with how it fits now, but if they do, I'm prepared for that. And worst case scenario, I can always add elastic into this version as well. I think that's the best part about having double knit straps, is that it's obviously a hollow tube, so you can thread elastic or something through, maybe even string or something, just to give a bit more stability. The elastic doesn't have any tension on it in the first version that I made, so it's more just to bring the fabric in a little bit more, that without puckering it or having any tension on the elastic. The length in this one is pretty much perfect. I'm really happy with it. Because it's a tank top, I don't mind it being a little bit more cropped. I'm not really wearing this to work or anything like that. So very happy with the length on this one. Saying that, I might have to go back and redo the bind off. I spent a bit of time talking about the stretchy versus the non-stretchy bind off in my sea salt tee. For this tank top, I went with the non-stretchy bind off. Again, I was binding it off in the car, so I wasn't really paying attention to what I was doing or didn't think to try it on halfway through and check that I could get it over my head. It can just about get over comfortably. I am a little bit nervous that one day I'm going to snap the bind off yarn, but so far we've been okay. If that does happen, then I'll probably go back and take the time to do the stretchy bind off, but for now this is working for me just fine. I can stand up and show off the non-stretchiness of this. It does mean that also that it flares out just a tiny bit. I don't think it bothers me too much, but if it does snap, I will definitely go back and do a stretchy bind off instead of this one. So overall, this is a great addition to my summer knits wardrobe. I think I'll continue making more of these. I do have another 2 skeins of the cotton merino in a purpley grey colour that I purchased intending to make another one of these. I'm not sure if I'll make it this summer or I might save that for next summer. It's nice that I've been able to make one every year. I always seem to cast them on around the same time. I cast both of them on around December, I think, so I have really nice memories of knitting this in summer, around Christmas, watching Christmas movies. So I might save that one for next December. So those are my 2 finished objects that I had to share today. So let's move on to my works in progress. My first work in progress is a pair of socks, and I have finally finished the first sock of my Somerset socks. This is a pattern in the 52 Weeks of Socks book by Marion Knits, and I've knit this in a Manos Uruguay yarn called Feliz in the colour Karst, which is a beautiful grey tonal colour with some really nice light and dark variation. So the yarn is a superwash merino and modal blend. It's a 70-30 blend, and it's something different to what I've used before. I hadn't heard of modal. I think from my quick Google search, it's a little bit like rayon, but it's made from beechwood trees instead. So my understanding is that it's a bit more like a plastic-free, no nylon sock yarn. I wasn't sure what to make with this. I was toying with the idea of doing a summer tank or something, but from the previous summer tanks that I've made in mainly wool or 100% wool yarn, I just don't find I reach for them. If I'm going to wear a tank top, it's usually because it's a really hot day, and wool is just not practical when I want to wear something like that. So instead I decided to make them into a pair of socks. I chose this pattern only because of the name. They are also beautiful socks. I do really like the motif, but Somerset is the county that I was born in England, and I recently went back there. So it felt fitting that I had this project on the go when I was there, and I do have some really nice memories attached to working on this. When I was in the car, I went with my now fiance and my parents, so it was very nostalgic being back where I was born. My dad was driving me around everywhere. I was knitting in the back seat next to my mum, So it was really nice. I have some really special memories attached to this. In the previous episode, I said that I wasn't in any hurry to finish these, but somehow I managed to get the first sock done. They're just the project that I take out and about with me. It is a little bit tricky to memorize the chart, I found, but once I was past the heel, I think for the leg, I pretty much memorized the chart, so they were a bit more of a portable project. So here is a close-up of this sock. There is an Estonian braid at the bottom, which is a new technique I hadn't done before. It was really fun and it looked very effective. And then you go straight into the chart, which is repeated the whole way up the sock. And then you do another braid at the cuff and finish off with some twisted rib. Then I also did a Jenny surprisingly stretchy bind off. I don't do a yarn over before every stitch that I do on a sock like this. I find that I don't need that much stretch and then it flares out even when it's on my leg. Obviously this does flare out now, but when it's on, it fits me really well, so that doesn't bother me at all. So I just do a yarn over every other stitch when I'm doing a bind off for toe-up socks. Now that the first one is done, I have managed to cast on the second sock. I've just done the toe and the braid and I'm ready to start doing the chart repeats. We'll just get this done whenever they're done. I'll probably feel more like knitting on these as the weather gets a bit cooler, but at least I've made a start on the second sock, so I will be more inclined to finish it now. My one issue with this pattern is how many mistakes are in it. Obviously it's a printed pattern, so you can't get a Ravelry update and just have a new PDF with all of the mistakes fixed in it. And there is a section of errata for this pattern on the Liner magazine website, which I managed to find. But obviously you're not prompted to do that in the book because they don't print it knowing there's mistakes in there. So it was just by chance that I managed to find it. It was when I went to start the chart for the first sock and I was a bit confused because the chart started on 2 or 3. It didn't start at 1. So I was reading back and trying to figure out if I needed to move stitches around on the top needle, or was that just a knit? Was I supposed to slip? I had no idea what I was doing. I'm not very confident with toe-up socks. I haven't knit too many before and it really threw me off. So I decided to look on the Ravelry page and see if anyone else had found how to explain this better than the pattern had. And then I think that's where I found the link to the errata for the Liner website. It was a little bit disappointing that such a simple mistake like starting the chart on the wrong number was in a printed pattern like that. Obviously, I don't know what goes into designing patterns. I've never designed a pattern before and I appreciate the amount of work that goes into it. But for a printed pattern, I had a little bit more expectations that it would be thoroughly tested and proofread, and then I assumed that simple mistakes would have been picked up. Another simple mistake I spotted quite early on in the pattern is that the stitch count referred to the number of stitches on either your top or your bottom needle, but it was actually the total number of stitches, and it was for the toe when you're increasing. So I was really confused. I had to do my own quick sense check for the number of increases that I was told to do and then work out how many stitches that was meant to be. Obviously, like I said, I'm not very confident with toe-up socks, so it's definitely not a beginner-friendly pattern, and it was a little bit annoying to have to keep referring to the errata or double-check things, and then I just lost the trust completely in the pattern. Obviously, I've finished one sock now. The second one will be much easier, and it's a doable pattern if you have the errata there, or you're a bit more experienced in knitting socks that you just know when there's a mistake and you know how to fix it. But I just thought it was something worth commenting on. I'm really looking forward to blocking this as well. I haven't blocked this one yet. I'll just wait until I finish the second one to do that. But I'm looking forward to seeing how the motif might change a little bit. It might open up. I'm interested to see how this garter will block compared to the main motif in the middle. I'm just looking forward to seeing how it will change with blocking. And this yarn is a little bit stiff. To be fair, I'm knitting it at a fairly tight gauge. The pattern does call for a bit more of a sport or heavy fingering weight yarn, which is why I decided to go with this pattern as well, is that the meterage versus the weight of the yarn match very closely to that recommended in the pattern. So I think it is supposed to be knit at a little bit of a tighter gauge. I'm just knitting these on my standard 2.25mm needles, so you can see that it is quite tight. But I just think that will mean that they're extra hard wearing and they'll be less likely to get holes in them. So that was just a quick update on the socks. As I said, there's no rush to get them done, but I thought I would share that I have finished one sock and I've been very good and cast on the second sock, so it's ready to go when I want to pick it back up again. I think now that I've memorized the chart pretty much, it will be a lot quicker for me to work on the second one, but we'll get to that whenever I feel like picking up socks again. Moving on to my next work in progress, and another summer t-shirt is on the needles, and that is this time a Tolsta tee. This is a pattern by Rebecca of the Creabea, and I have knit this before. I knit a stripy version in a DK weight yarn, which was a wool and silk blend, but this is the fingering weight version of the pattern. If you haven't heard of the Tolsta tee pattern, you have to get your hands on it if you want to knit some summer t-shirts. Rebecca started off with designing a DK weight version of this pattern and had that tested and released it, and then I bought it the day it was released, which I don't usually do for patterns. So after the DK weight version of the pattern was released, I think she said that she had some comments from people living in much warmer climates saying that they really liked the pattern, but a DK weight t-shirt is not practical for them to wear in a hot climate. Obviously, I'm in a hot climate and I don't have a problem wearing it, but I am someone who runs cold. I'm not usually overheating, so I do wear my DK weight version quite a lot. But the fingering weight version was then designed in response to that, which is so thoughtful for a designer to really take into account other people's opinions and their feedback on the pattern, and then to offer a fingering weight version. So after designing the fingering weight version of the pattern, she updated the original pattern in Ravelry and added in the fingering weight pattern just free. You don't have to pay for it, which is so generous. Obviously they're the same construction but a different gauge, and she offers a very large size range, so there's a lot of sizes that you would have to grade for as well. The idea behind the Tolsta tee is to have a blank canvas of a pattern that is a raglan t-shirt, and the knitter is encouraged to add their own modifications. Obviously I did stripes for my first version. There's some really beautiful designs that are just in a plain colour as per the pattern is written. There's some with lace detail, picot edges, different hem options, and it's really interesting to see how people add their own creative spin onto a pattern. So I have knit my version in the Knitting for Olive Pure Silk, and it is my first time using this yarn. This is the colour Lamb's Ear, and it's a very interesting greenish grey colour. I'm not sure how accurately it will be picking it up. I think it's looking a little bit darker than it actually is in person, but it's a very interesting colour, something a little bit different. Grey is a safe colour for me. I know I like and wear it, and I think this one suits me quite well as well. So I've knit this one in the first size. There's a bit of a theme here with my projects in that I have gone off gauge completely and knit a different size than what's recommended for me in the pattern. But I have justification for everything, so I haven't just decided to do that out of the blue. As it's my first time using this yarn, I made sure to do a couple of swatches and make sure that the end fabric was something that I was happy with. The recommended needle size in the pattern is a 3.5mm, which is what I did my first swatch on, and I think I've shown this before, but here it is again. It is meant to be quite a loose gauge. It's quite a see-through fabric and it has a little bit of nice drape to it. It softens up so much with washing compared to the unblocked fabric as well, which I'm very excited to block this one when it's all done. So unfortunately with this swatch, my gauge was a little bit too big. There's a bit of a theme here. I've learned that I'm a loose knitter now, so I, in hindsight, probably should have just sized down needles straight away, knowing how loose of a knitter I am. I've also heard that the pure silk grows quite a lot. I've had someone else tell me that a camisole that they made also grew a lot widthways and lengthways. So bearing that in mind, I decided to go down a needle size. I did my second swatch on a 3mm needle. Yeah, it's not really a proper swatch, it's very small. I just wanted to get an idea on my stitch gauge for this one. And I was very close to gauge for this. I was pretty much bang on, maybe half a stitch off, but I didn't really love how the fabric was feeling. This one is much more drapey and soft and open. This one was starting to get a little bit too stiff, and I didn't really want that in my finished t-shirt. So as I did this on a 3.5 and this was on a 3, I decided to split the difference and go for a 3.25mm needle. Because I knew that my gauge would still be a little bit big, I also decided to go down a size in the pattern for this t-shirt. And so far, I think it will pay off. As you can see, I've finished the yoke and I'm onto the body of the t-shirt. So here's how it's fitting so far. As you can see, I've made a little bit of progress on the body. Most of this was done at knit night actually. I was quite impressed with how much I managed to get done. The pure silk is a little bit hard wearing on my hands. I'm sure everybody else has said this when they've used this yarn. It's not hurting me as such, but I do try and take regular breaks from knitting. I don't try and do rows and rows and rows all at once without stopping. So far I haven't had any issues. I'm just being a bit mindful of not hurting my hands and then not being able to knit at all. Obviously I'm wearing this over a t-shirt, but if you can see there's not very much room at the underarms. I didn't do any extra raglan increases from the first size in the pattern, and if I was on gauge, the first size would give me no ease, which is, I would say, pretty much where I am now. Maybe a couple of centimeters of positive ease at my full bust, but pretty much we're at no ease, and I am a little bit worried that I don't have very much room in the underarms. Obviously when the sleeve is on and the body is finished and there's a little bit more weight on it, that might change a little bit. But I'm just having faith that this will grow out as everybody says that it does, and I'll have a perfectly fitting t-shirt. As you can see, I've also done a folded over neckline on this one. I took some inspiration from my sea salt tees. It's a feature I really like in that one, so now I've practiced the technique a little bit more, I decided to do the same for this. So the original pattern does start with the ribbing, and it is quite a wide neckline. As you can see, this one is more of a boat neck, which is a little bit different. It's not my favorite neckline. Raglans aren't necessarily my favorite construction, but I was looking forward to trying this yarn, and because it's quite a loose gauge, it does have fairly low meterage requirements, so I thought it was a bit of a lower risk pattern to make. And of course I do really like the overall look of the t-shirt when it's done. So in order to do the folded over neckline, I skipped the ribbing section of the pattern completely and just cast on the same number of stitches for the first size. In hindsight, I would perhaps have taken out 4 or 8 stitches to do the neckline cast on, and then added maybe a few extra raglans to get back up to the stitch count, or just increase them straight away after I had done my first round after casting on. I'm not sure how that would have worked, so I'm glad that I just played it safe for this one because it's definitely still wearable. It's not too wide. It definitely has a good amount of coverage. I do think when there's a bit more weight on the body and the sleeves, it might round out a little bit more. It does look quite angular at the moment. Part of that might also be to do with the very tight gauge that I've had to do for the neckline. I went down quite a lot of needle sizes in order to get this to sit flat and comfortably. As I said, I used a 3.25mm needle for the main body and ended up going all the way down to a 2.25mm needle to do the neckband. Quite honestly, I was very worried about how wide it was looking before I added the neckband on. I wanted to make sure that it was a good decision and that it was going to work before I knit all of the body. So before I split for sleeves, I did go in and add the neckline, and I think it's paid off. It's a little bit different. It's obviously different to my first version with the ribbing, and I was also worried about how ribbing would look in this yarn. I didn't do ribbing in my swatch, which I probably should have, just to see how it looked, but I do really like how clean and crisp the folded edge looks. So here it is a little bit closer. You can see that there's a tiny bit of puckering here, which I'm fairly confident will just block out, but I'm quite happy with how this has pulled in the neckline quite a bit. Can you see the difference in gauge and how stiff this is? It feels so much stiffer compared to this. But again, I just wanted to make sure that I was happy with how the neckline fits in the end. So I don't have too much further to go on the body. I might do a mid-project block when I've added a few more inches. Probably not quite yet, it's definitely too cropped. But the plan is to do folded over hem at the bottom, add a few rounds on the sleeves, and then do folded over again on the sleeves, very similar to the sea salt tee. But I think it's nice to have similar aspects in my finished t-shirts, but different constructions. For me, the raglan went by a lot quicker than the set in sleeve construction did. I do find raglans get a little bit boring, so it's not something that I'm knitting regularly, but it was nice to go back and have a very simple, easy to do construction. I didn't have to really refer to the pattern. I just kept knitting until I had reached the right stitch count. I'm gonna feel so fancy wearing a 100% silk t-shirt. I think it's such a luxurious thing that you can make for yourself. Knitting for Olive posted a very interesting reel about their pure silk yarn a week or so ago, about the differences between their cruelty-free silk versus traditional commercially made silk, and that the silkworms hatch out of their cocoon before they harvest the silk. So that's why it is a bit more rough and ropey. It's not a smooth strand because the silkworm has left the cocoon and then they rip it open, so it's not like one long continuous thread that the manufacturer can spin to make a really smooth, shiny fabric. So I thought that was very interesting. Definitely go and check out the reel if you wanted to hear that a little bit more better explained or see the graphic. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I was very surprised at how the yarn felt when I received it. It does feel like a very dry linen or cotton before it's blocked, but then when it is blocked, it does soften up really nicely. So looking forward to having another summer t-shirt in my wardrobe. I find that I wear them quite a lot, even sometimes into the cooler months, that I can still wear them with a cardigan or something over. It really suits the climate that I live in, so it'd be really nice to have more very wearable pieces in my wardrobe. I have one final work in progress to share, and that is something that I took down to Margaret River over the last long weekend. I didn't have to drive, so I got lots of knitting time done. We went there with the exclusive purpose to relax, and I got so much knitting done. It was really nice. I wasn't intending on really doing much knitting. I didn't think I would have much time to, or I just prefer to do something else. But I'm glad I took this one because I pretty much managed to knit the entire body of this one. So this is my home cardigan designed by Caidree, and we have some things to discuss on this one. I'm not 100% sure if I'm liking where this is going for quite a few reasons. I have to say the pattern itself is perfect. There's nothing wrong with the pattern. It's mainly to do with my yarn choice and the modifications that I've made to it as well. The pattern is very well written. It's the second Caidree pattern that I have knit, and they're really well written. They have very clear instructions and they're nicely laid out. So if you like the look of the home cardigan, then I would recommend the pattern itself. My main issue with this work in progress is the yarn. So I've knit this in a very, very inexpensive superwash merino yarn. It's an Heirloom Merino Magic Templar, I think is what it's called, and it's in the color Magnolia, which is probably the main issue with it. I bought this yarn quite a few years ago and I actually knit it up into a sweater number 18 that I wore once or twice and never wore it again after that. The gauge for my sleeves was way too tight compared to the body, so it just didn't have good proportions. It's also a little bit itchy considering it's superwash yarn. I don't find it the most comfortable to wear, so for those reasons I just never wore it. I finally got around to frogging that project a few weeks ago and I decided to repurpose the yarn into this cardigan. I have to say, because it's a Templar yarn and I'm knitting this on 6mm needles, it has gone by very quickly. So if I do decide to frog this once again, it hasn't been a huge time investment. Not that that necessarily influences whether I frog something or not, but it does make me feel a bit better given that it hasn't been months and months of knitting that I might have to frog out again. So the colour of this is not my favourite. I bought it online, so I didn't know the true colour of it. If I'd seen it in person, I probably wouldn't have chosen it. It's a bit of a weird in-between yellow cream colour. It's not a beige, it's not quite cream, it's not quite yellow. It's just a bit of an ugly colour if I'm being honest, in my opinion. I don't think it really suits me. It doesn't really fit into my wardrobe. So that's kind of the main thing that was putting me off from working on this project. As I said, I'd already knit the whole body and it wasn't looking very good. The ribbing at the bottom was really cinching it in. I did decide to go with the 2x2 ribbing instead of 1x1 ribbing in the pattern. I'm not sure why. I think I was just inspired maybe by the Eva cardigan by Petit Knit. I think that is very similar look to this at the moment. I don't think that's knit at the same gauge, but I did see that on Instagram the other day and I was like, that's probably where I got the idea to do the chunky 2x2 rib. And I think I like how that looks. I did think that that was maybe contributing to why I wasn't liking the project so much, but I think that we're going to keep the 2x2 rib. So anyway, as I was saying, I had knit the body, done the 2x2 rib, and it looked awful. It looked so bad. I have a photo before blocking, and then because it looked so bad, I decided to block it, and you can see the comparison on how much it grew and opened up. This yarn grows so much. It's really annoying because it's so hard to judge the length or the fit or the flow of a fabric when it's changing so much when you block it. So after I had blocked it, I thought I liked it a little bit more. It was fitting a little bit better. I could see the length of it a bit more and judge the fit a little bit better. I still wasn't 100% sold, so it did sit in a corner for a little while. And the other night I did pick it up and actually knit pretty much the whole sleeve over a couple of nights. And you can see this fabric before blocking is just so bumpy. Maybe it's my tension, but even for the body working back and forth versus around for the sleeve, it's not, yeah, it just doesn't look very good. You can understand why I wasn't impressed with how it was looking before I'd blocked it. Obviously it does even out very nicely when it is blocked. If you can see a comparison on the body that's blocked versus the sleeve, the stitches are just very uneven. Obviously I frogged this yarn from a sweater, so maybe that's why it's a bit uneven. I did soak the yarn and let it dry, so it was completely straight when I started knitting on this. It's not all curly or anything like that, so I think it maybe is to do with that, or it's just not a great quality yarn, probably a bit of both to be honest. So now I finished one of the sleeves and I tried it on last night, and I think I like where it's going a little bit more. There are a gazillion ends in this because I've had to frog it from a previous sweater, which is not going to be fun to weave in at the end, but I'll try this one on and we can have a discussion about how it's fitting. I think I'm a bit red. It's so warm in here. I'm sitting next to a window and I have this wool cardigan on, but we'll quickly talk about it and then I can take it off again. So here's how it's looking with a sleeve. If I go back. So here's how it's looking with a sleeve on. A little bit of an improvement. I think it's a very casual looking cardigan. I think I can pull this one off. I'll quickly mention also the button band. I very rarely wear cardigans buttoned up, so I'm not sure if I will even add buttons onto this. We do have buttonholes, however, but the top one is very high up and I don't really like how this looks. I think it needs to be a little bit lower, maybe around here, or even just where the second one is, and shouldn't have added in this top buttonhole. I think that's my fault because I did modify to 2x2 rib. I had to do a bit of shuffling around of where my buttonholes were, and I think I just moved the first one up a little bit too high. I'm going to say it was the yarn's fault because I didn't know how much it was going to grow, and I obviously overcompensated when I was putting in the last buttonhole. So I need to decide whether I go back and just redo the buttonholes and move that one down, or take out the fourth buttonhole, or reknit the button band without buttonholes. I don't have buttons set aside for this yet. I'd probably have to go and purchase some, so I am leaning towards just taking the buttonholes out completely. I would also like to quickly mention how neat my 2x2 ribbing Italian or tubular bind off is getting. I think in my what I knit in 2023 video, I was comparing some of my projects and how messy my tubular bind off was looking in 2x2 rib. So this is on the hem, which I did first, and it's looking okay. It's not the neatest, but it doesn't look terrible. It's definitely an improvement. But then on the button band, I think it looks even better again. This is knit at a tighter gauge, so that might have had something to do with it, but I am glad that I'm improving that and practicing a skill that I want to improve as well. But if you have any tips on a neat 2x2 tubular bind off, I'd love to hear them. Or maybe it's just one of those things that practice makes perfect. But definitely I can notice an improvement. So that's a good positive thing about this project. As I said, the color is probably what's putting me off the most about the cardigan, but I think we're just going to have to over dye it. I have these Ashford dyes, which are wool dyes. I bought their like beginner dyeing kit, which I have used once, but that's a story for another time. And I have this black color as well. I was intending to dye it black. I have a feeling because it's such a yellow undertone, I don't want to risk dyeing it a colour that looks really funny with that yellow undertone. Obviously I'll dye a swatch first and make sure that I'm happy with it before I dye the whole cardigan and then just ruin another whole project and not be able to recover the yarn. So I think I will have a go with dyeing the swatch first. I think black is a safe choice because I think it will mask the yellowy undertone of the yarn. So that is my home cardigan. I didn't mention I'm knitting the first size and have gone down needle sizes as well. I am using a 6mm for the body instead of a 6.5, and I'm pretty close to gauge, I think. Obviously the yarn grows a lot, so I have a feeling the sleeve might be a little bit too long after blocking. I'm not sure if you noticed that it was pretty much at my wrist as it was. I haven't bound it off yet. I think I will do another mid-project block before I bind off and then decide from there whether I need to shorten it a little bit or if I'm okay to do the second sleeve just the same. As it stands, I've just knit it as per the pattern instructions, so I might need to take out a decrease or potentially shorten the ribbing, but I do like that the sleeve cuff ribbing matches the amount of ribbing on the hem, so I'll have to make a few decisions after I block that one. It does feel good to get that yarn out of the stash, I suppose, even though it was made into another sweater. I'm glad that I finally frogged that, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to get a more wearable garment out of that yarn. So it feels good to get that big sweaters quantity out of my stash and into something wearable. I think I will block it again today, and then it should be dry by tomorrow, and then by the middle of the week I should be able to finish the second sleeve. So probably by next episode I will have finished the cardigan or be very close to, and maybe would have dyed it. I have a feeling I might procrastinate a little bit on dyeing it once it's done. I also obviously need to make a decision on the buttonholes, but I think because it's actual Ashford wool dye, it should be okay. I wasn't sure if I had a black in the set that I have, so I was thinking I might have to do a RIT dye job, which never ends well for me. Their dyes are okay, I guess, but whenever I go to use them, it just never works out to be the colour that I intend. So fingers crossed. If you have any tips for dyeing with the Ashford dyes, I'd love to hear them because I'm not very experienced at all. So that wraps up most of the knitting. I have a few acquisitions to share, but if that's not your cup of tea, thank you for joining me for this episode. But if you'd like to quickly hear some of my acquisitions, I have 2 different acquisitions to share. The first one are 2 skeins of this bright pink eucalyptus yarn. This is a yarn that my parents bought for me. They were in England after I had left, and I think they were in just a craft store or something that had a few skeins of yarn lying around. My dad just sent me a photo and said, which one would you like? And it was just the color of this one. I couldn't really see what fiber it was or the weight or anything. I obviously am in a bit of a pink phase, and it's a very bright pink, so I'm undecided on what I will make with this one just yet. So the yarn is 97% eucalyptus, 3% other wood fibers. I'm not sure what that means. I guess maybe like rayon or something else like that, but it is really nice and soft. It is 165 meters per 100 grams and in the color Magenta, which is a perfect description for this color. I do have 2 of these, so I have a pretty decent amount of yardage to make a summer garment. I have a few options in mind, but I haven't made any decisions yet, and I haven't swatched for anything just yet. So my first option is either the Drinks on the Patio crop or maybe the Vegas top. I think they're fairly similar. I think the Vegas top is designed with a little bit more positive ease, and I have a feeling the size range is not quite as expensive as the Drinks on the Patio crop. I'll have to do a little bit of research into both of those and maybe swatch for one of them and decide which one I want to go with. I think because the Drinks on the Patio crop has a little bit less positive ease, I might be able to make it a little bit longer. I'll have to check out the yardage requirements compared to what I have and make a decision on that. The other thought I had was to maybe knit a pair of shorts. I have knit a pair of shorts before. They were fingering weight in a bamboo yarn, and they did grow out quite a lot. They're just worn as pajamas around the house, but they're so comfortable, and I think I might make another pair with this yarn. The pattern I used for my first pair was not the best pattern in the world. I did pay for it, but it wasn't very expensive. I'm not sure if it was tested. I haven't followed this designer on Instagram or seen any of their other designs. It was also very limited in its sizing, so probably not something I would make again. I was having a look around on Ravelry and I did find the Ripple Butt shorts by Jessie May Designs, and I think they're really cute. They are designed with negative ease and they're a chunky rib, maybe a 4x4 rib or something like that. They do look really comfortable though, so I'm thinking I might swatch for that and see how we go. Because it is 100% like plant fibers, there's no wool in there to have any memory. I have a feeling if I want to go down that road of shorts, they should be a little bit more oversized and loose rather than having negative ease, because I'm not sure if that will look great once they're all stretched out. Again, I'll do some swatching and make a decision from there. So I'm looking forward to getting into that yarn. I'm not sure if I'll make it this summer. It might be another thing that gets pushed back into next summer. My second acquisition and the final thing I want to share today are these two balls of the Bûches yarn. It is their Petit Lambswool, and this is my purchase from Knit Night this week. I was so kindly invited to do a knit along with two of the girls who are at Knit Night. They have a bit of a craft group and they so kindly invited me to do their knit along of the Mudo socks by the Petit knitter. Of course, whilst I was there, I just had to get the yarn and I chose these two colors. So we have the medium grey brown and the off-white color. I think there's a really good contrast between these, so I'm excited to see how it will look in the color work. I'm looking forward to knitting another pair of colorwork socks and practicing my colorwork as well, so we'll see how they go. I haven't cast them on yet. I'll probably cast them on in the next few weeks once the knit along officially starts. This is the recommended yarn in the pattern, which I was a bit surprised about. It was obviously a very spontaneous purchase. I hadn't really considered knitting the socks before, so I hadn't looked into the details on the pattern, but it is the recommended yarn and it's not a typical sock yarn. It is 100% lamb's wool. There's no nylon in the yarn, so I am a little bit worried about how it will wear. Most of my hand knit socks are not worn in shoes anyway, so they will probably be house socks and won't be getting a lot of hard wear into boots or anything like that. So I think it will be okay. Someone did have a good suggestion though, and they did recommend holding it with a nylon thread. So perhaps I'll look into that just for a little bit of peace of mind, but I haven't decided yet. They are all over colorwork as well, so perhaps the extra fabric created by the floats will have a little bit of just extra padding in there and might not wear through so quickly. I trust the Petit knitter. I think she has knit a lot more colorwork socks than I have, so if she thinks that it's okay to knit them in this yarn, then I'll trust her. And worst case scenario, I knit the socks, they do get a hole in them, and then I can learn how to mend socks. So it's not all lost. If that does happen, I just get to gain a new skill. So that brings us to the end of today's episode. I think I've been talking for absolutely ages. I hope that you enjoyed listening to me ramble on about my projects, and hopefully you were feeling inspired or you learned something. Thanks again for watching and take good care of yourself, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye!